This podcast is kindly sponsored by Euro Auctions. The next auction takes place on the 12th and 13th of December in Dromore, County Tyrone. So welcome to another episode of the Ice Expo Podcast, lifting the lid on all things plant and construction. I'm delighted to be joined today by Tom Parlon. Tom, what an amazing CV. So you were a former politician, a TD for the Laois Offaly Constitution. You were Minister of State for the Department of Finance with a special responsibility for the Office of Public Works. You were the IFA President and the head of the CIF, just to name a few. So, Tom, thanks very much firstly for coming in. It's an honour to have you here today. So let's go back. Where did it all start? Did you go to college? Tell me a bit about your background.
Well, I was born on a pretty small farm down in a place called Coolderry, down in County Offaly. And I just grew up with a fascination for farming and for farm machinery.
Okay.
And I went to agricultural college.
Right.
Did my Leaving Cert in the CBS in Roscrea. Went to agricultural college over in Gurteen, which at the time was largely a sort of a Presbyterian college for Presbyterian students, but it had begun to open up for all denominations, and had a good year there, and planned to go into farm apprenticeship.
Okay.
But and a friend of mine was going to go to Australia, and it's probably just an indication of how long ago this is now.
That was rare back then.
There was an incentive to go to Australia. You got your passage paid, and if you worked out there for 2 years, you got to go there for free, because they were crying out for workers in Australia now. And there wasn't the same incentive as there is now for Irish young people. So in the end, it was back when Ireland was joining the European Union, and there was good prospects for agriculture. And in fairness to my mother and father, they didn't want me going, but they didn't put any big pressure. But my dad did say, look, it's a bit of a shame now you're heading off just as things are opening up for the country and opening up for Irish farming, and there's going to be opportunities here. And, if you want to stay home and get involved in it, you're very welcome. If you want to head off with you.
There was no pressure on you anyway.
But I decided to stay home, and we expanded our farm into a fairly substantial dairy herd at the time. And then I started doing a bit of contract work myself.
Okay.
Started off cutting firewood for sale, which at the time was very lucrative and lots of cash. And,
you enjoyed that.
I was a hard worker now. You wouldn't think looking at me now, but I was a really hard worker. I didn't mind putting in the 18 hours and hail, rain or snow.
You like that hands dirty.
I like that toughness and so on. So built up the farm, and built up my contracting business, was renting farm, other land, and, I had a fleet of machinery and love machinery. I'm still fascinated with machinery. But then through Macra na Firma that I was involved in, I won a scholarship to go to New Zealand to study dairying and work on dairy farms there. So that was big fascination at the time, took off. They gave me my flight tickets. I went off with Air Singapore, and, had a wonderful experience in New Zealand for about a year. While I was away, my younger brother Joe took over the farming duties.
How did that go?
I never milked a cow since.
Stop.
So I expanded my own farm. I built a commercial piggery, and got married and reared a family and moved on from there. And eventually, being involved in IFA, I became president, national president of the IFA.
So that was your first, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it was it worked all the way up along, but, they have a very good rule in IFA that you just spend 4 years in any position, and, you step down or you move up. So when you're finished as president, you just got to go.
Right, okay.
And
then what encouraged you then to go from being president of the IFA into politics?
Well, it was funny. It was in 2002, and the Progressive Democrats were a party that had been in government. And I was approached. I had a pretty good profile as IFA president at the time. We'd been involved in a lot of big campaigns nationally and in Europe. And I was approached by Fine Gael and by the Progressive Democrats to know would I stand in the general election, because I was going to be finished in IFA. And eventually I took a chance on it with Mary Harney, stood for the Progressive Democrats.
Mary's local here to us in Newcastle.
And to big surprise of most people, I got elected first time round.
Oh, and that's rare, isn't it?
Rare enough. And then to make matters better, Mary had promised me if I was to run about all the things that happen, but she said you'll definitely be part of the government as well. So when I got elected, I was appointed Minister of State in Finance and had responsibility for OPW and had a wonderful 5 years in government.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose the one thing, and it's a lot more intense now with social media, the intrusion into your life in politics is massive.
Yeah.
If you're not prepared for that, you shouldn't be there.
Right, okay.
But then nobody goes into politics. Nobody puts a gun to your head and says you should be in politics. You choose to go, go out and you look for votes and so on. The intrusion was substantial. And
Can
at
you give
weekends,
me an example of that?
Well, you just had to be at everyone's beck and call.
Right, okay.
And I often gave the example, people would always want to make a point to you, if they got. And if you were anywhere and you went to the loo, you could be guaranteed a guy was going to pull in beside you and say, listen, Minister, do you know what you should be doing?
Telling you what to do.
He could F you out of it, or he could praise you, or he could ask you to do something, or advise you. But invariably, I never went for a pee without...
Are you serious?
without being presented with some sort of a political... but that's just the
nature of the game.
The public feel, and rightly so, I suppose, the public feel that they have an ownership of public representatives and they should make their point to them,
Yeah.
But anyhow, I was either very lucky or very unlucky that after my 5 years, I went for election again with the best of hopes and didn't get elected.
Right, okay.
So I suppose I've been a bit lucky in my career. I was no sooner out of politics when I was approached by the CIF or by a recruitment agency on behalf of the CIF to say they were trying to recruit a Director General and would I have an interest? And sure, I realised I'm unemployed at the moment. And
right.
I sat for that, got a very rigorous interview and I got the job.
You got the job. Go back there one step. So when you would have served as Minister for State, and obviously a lot of your responsibility was over the Office of Public Works, I suppose they manage everything from what government buildings to, national momentums or monuments. What was the most complex challenge or project that you had to oversee during that time?
Well, Ireland had and we're about to have it again, the presidency of the EU.
Right.
I think that comes around now every 20 odd years. So I was minister while we had the presidency.
Right.
And I was chairing the EU ministerial meetings that happened. So I took over from a very flamboyant Italian guy, Gianfranco, and I chaired those meetings. I remember when the handover was happening in Rome, he wanted me to carry on some of the policy initiatives that he had begun. He was a good politician and a good guy, but the OPW at that time were the biggest employer of architects in the country. So it was normal that when the Royal Institute of Architects were having their AGM, they would ask the minister at the OPW to speak at their AGM. Okay. And that particular year, it was in Bern in Switzerland.
Oh, lovely.
So I had to make an arrangement to leave Rome fairly early on the evening of the Presidium and fly up to Bern.
Right.
But Gianfranco said, no, Tom, you must wait and I need you to hand over and we're having a special dinner. And I said, I cannot do that. I am committed to being in Bern in the morning.
Right.
So anyhow, he said, you leave this to me. I will take care of all the stuff. So I had a PA with me and I wasn't too sure. But anyhow, he organised a private jet for me in the morning.
Wow.
To fly up to Bern.
Sounds nice.
Just myself and my PA. And we were there in time for the... So that was a very exciting time.
100%.
We had the presidiums here. We had them either in Farmyard, and I had a special one then in Portlaoise. Wow. And we had our dinner that night for all the ministers in Kinnetty Castle.
Oh, lovely.
And I was thinking, I was at a meeting in Portlaoise this week, and there was big security about having a presidium in Portlaoise.
I can only imagine.
And because of the prison there and the amount of Republican prisoners that were there and so on. But the British minister was a character. And he was saying to me one evening over after the meeting, he says, what's all this talk about about security here, Tom? For God's sake, it can't be that dangerous or whatever anyhow. So I was explaining, well, I said, it's not. I said, most of the allegedly bad guys are all locked up. But then there would be, associates coming to visit them and so on. You'd never know who. So anyway, the next evening I met him and he said, Tom, I sneaked out past security, he says, and I went down and had a pint in a pub down in the middle of the town, and it was the most lovely pint I ever had.
Very good. Stop.
But when you think back now, you think of all the casual good stuff. But the notion of the minister going downtown
to have a pint
in Portlaoise and getting nabbed by some and being kidnapped or something would have been horrific.
That's brilliant.
But, those things happen. And
those things, looking back, obviously, again, when you're with the OPW, what was the, I suppose, greatest achievement that you felt that you achieved during that period?
Well, I suppose, like I see now, ministers are inclined to be berated and complained about if they do something for their constituency. Mm-hmm. My view, when I got elected, I felt that Laois Offaly was a very neglected constituency, and my absolute sort of intention was to get as much investment as I could into Laois Offaly. So we had a number of different projects around, heritage sites that we had down in Emo Gardens, the Gandon House and all that, opening that up. The Durrow High Cross was out, there from the 5th century, out in the weather, and a fabulous, Celtic cross. We had that housed in the church, and the church now, there's still not great public access to see it. But I sort of feel that the projects we did actually in Offaly were ones that I certainly love to go visit still and say, well, at least I had some little input into those, because our heritage is still of massive importance to us.
And then why did you decide then, I suppose, I suppose because you weren't elected then, to take up the role in the CIF. Why weren't you elected? Do you have any?
Yeah, well, I suppose they always say a small party in a coalition gets the blame for everything. So there were 8, when I joined the PDs and won my seat that time, there were 8 members of the PDs in government, and some big hitters. Michael McDougall was the Minister for Justice that time. Mary Harney was the Taoiseach. Obviously Bertie Ahern, the leader of Fianna Fáil, was the Taoiseach, and I had a very good relationship with him, and I sat on a number of meetings with other ministers, and it was funny, and I met Bertie briefly yesterday at a function in Dublin. But
it's a real character.
A great character, but typically like myself, he could be very choice in his language when things weren't going well.
Right, okay.
And like, he was always impeccable before. I've never heard him use a swear word, publicly. Yeah. But if things weren't going right at a meeting, he would let rip, And I did enjoy those. And he would run his ministers, get the hell out of here, and come back when you've got an answer from me.
He was probably right.
I said to him and I still feel the same. I said to him one day when things were all going wrong and he'd run everyone out of the place, I said, there was a time when I thought if I knew a TD, I'd have some influence. But then if I ever became a TD, Jesus, would I be able to do what I liked? Yeah. But the notion of ever becoming the Taoiseach, you'd feel that you were so important and so powerful. Yeah. And he just rolled his eyes up to heaven. He said, and I still believe that's the case. I see different Taoiseach with the best intentions of the world. It's so hard to get stuff over the line. Yeah. So, politics, when you were saying about the trials, I suppose there's the politicians and their mandate, and then there's the permanent civil service and all the people that are there. And sometimes it can be so difficult to get the two to pull together and to move on. And we have so many instances of that now where, there's such a lethargy about stuff happening. Yeah. Particularly about infrastructure.
Yeah, 100%. So you took over the CIF in 2007. What a time for you to take over that with the whole construction collapse. I suppose, what was your priority at the start then, when everything at that time it was?
Well, I suppose house prices, and they were being measured, house prices were at their absolute height. Yeah. House building numbers were at their height. Right. And it appeared that, everything, there were different economists out saying, all the indicators are positive. And then all of a sudden the opposite happened. Oh, God. And clearly I, on behalf of the industry, had to be in denial, which I found that was difficult, and it was embarrassing sometimes, saying, no, this is not going to happen. Next year, the trend is going to reverse. And of course, it went down and down and down. And within CIF even, like I was the newest person appointed as Director General. We had to let more than half of our staff go because clearly when the industry went down, the subscriptions went down, the individual subscription based on their turnover. Like the CIF were nearly wiped out, but people say, so what? Look at all the hardship that other people had, but companies been let go and families been scattered all over the world.
So you lost
still
a lot of
massive
sleep.
Fallout. It was a horrific time.
I can't imagine what you were going through, like. And I suppose with everything that you went through at that time and you learned from it, can you see a collapse happening again?
Well, I think it's different now. I mean, obviously the banks then had overborrowed.
Yeah.
Like it was crazy, the lending decisions that were made with money that the banks didn't even have, So they're a lot more risk adverse now, maybe too much so. So it's hard to see. At that time, we had housing estates all over the place with nobody living in them and not finished. Now we have a massive housing shortage. So, all the indicators are very strong that construction is one of the areas that's going to have to stay there. Like the infrastructure deficit is shocking. The housing deficit is shocking. And, most of our good firms are being invited overseas to carry out stuff that's needed elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking there lately with Pascal Donoghue. Mm-hmm. He got such an accolade leaving and everyone was saying how wonderful he was and so on. And I read Miriam Lord in the Independent on about the different things, and she said he's after his final speech and getting his final sort of accolades from people, that he was going out through a pair of double doors, and just thanks be to God it was double doors because his head was so big at this stage. And I like Pascal, and I even met him just briefly, and wished him well.
Yeah.
But, I was going in leading delegations for years pre-budget, looking for extra infrastructure, looking for extra investment in housing, in water, in electricity generation. And, that's the biggest scandal. And, I think maybe when people reflect on Pascal, and I wouldn't want to put it all down to him, but he certainly had a very adverse reaction to spending on infrastructure, And I said to him once, which he didn't appreciate very much, I said, Pascal, you're the luckiest finance minister ever. The money keeps rolling in from the big multinationals, and all you have to decide to do is either to spend it or not spend it.
Yeah.
But it's shocking when you see that Irish Water, like the smallest development, can't get off the ground because there isn't capacity for Irish Water to put a pipe in. The smallest developments, I even see now they're talking about discharging stations for electric cars. Most of them that people have attempted to do can't get set up because there isn't the power. I do a bit of consultancy work and I work with a few energy companies, and the headaches that they have trying to get viable projects off the ground because of red tape and so on. So, when Pascal reflects on the great way he left the economy, and we have reserves and we have this and we have that and the other, we have a mess of an infrastructure situation. We have a mess of a housing situation. And, whatever windfalls were coming in that time, if they had been invested, and I know your own companies would have benefited out of that, but there was lots of capacity to put in extra. Like Irish Water as an entity was starved of funding. And so we have an awful lot of catching up to do.
What's the roadblocks that cause all this? Is it waiting on people to agree to sign off?
Well, one of them was there just wasn't a commitment from government to put the money into Irish Water, But like I see even just in the last week, a group of residents almost beside where CIF have their offices, have decided to launch a judicial review about the metro. And, that station that is just beside them there in Charlemont is very close to their properties. And I can understand any individual would say, well, Jesus, if my house has been affected by this, I need to have a say. But the fact that they can just come together, put in a judicial review, and it's likely to hold up a massive scheme that would be of such benefit to the country, such benefit to the industry, and they could hold it up for anything from 2 to 6 years.
Yeah, and then the knock-on effect then to contractors, anyone who's about to work on
well,
that.
we're trying to attract in big international players to to come in and invest in some elements of it. And they've been looking at this. And next thing they're going to, some guy is going to say, lads, there's a judicial review.
Yeah, they wouldn't touch you with a barge pole.
This could be 2 years delayed. It could be 6 years delayed. You might be better off to go to fucking Australia and do something down there because you're guaranteed it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, like, all of that. And, you know, I heard someone talking this morning about emergency legislation.
Right.
Like, we have the power within government to bring in emergency legislation about anything that's badly, for housing or for water or for whatever, even the metro. And more or less saying, until and there's a lot of planning gone through, and there was all the public planning things about the metro, and lots of people went in and said, I have a problem here, and it got resolved. Now, these residents, and I'm not making any claim about their right to, but they had lots of time to, but they waited until the last day. And because this judicial review is there, and because there are legal people that are making a bloody lot of money out of it, and smart, and they're able to find little loopholes in EU legislation and so on, and hold it up. But it shouldn't be allowed. We should find a way around it. And, you know, maybe our legal system have too much sway. I have a lot of regard for our new Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan. I think he's a sound guy and a smart guy. And, you know, we need someone like that to come out and say, we've gone too far. Yeah. And we have gone way too far on this.
Yeah. 100%, totally agree with you.
This podcast is kindly sponsored by Euro Auctions. The next auction takes place on the 12th and 13th of December in Dromore, County Tyrone.
Tom, what lessons from, I suppose, the 2007 to 2012 crisis do you believe that the construction industry must never forget going forward?
Well, I'd say just overextending themselves, you know, because, you know, it's a little bit like saying if there's free sweets or very cheap sweets in a shop, that is going to encourage kids to eat a lot more, and they will, of course. Yeah. So, like, because money was available from banks, cheaply and available, and the madness of international banks coming in here and competing with Irish banks and giving better rates. Bank of Scotland, and there was mad stuff happened in the banking. Yeah. And of course, guys choose, you know, we're going to go bigger and bigger and we're going to expand here. And there was housing estates being built in fucking mad places that never had, you know, now people would live. When I was in politics, and maybe that was, decentralisation was the big initiative that Charlie McCreevy introduced.
Okay.
So he was my Minister of Finance and I was his junior minister, and we got on quite well, and it was the OPW's job. But the opposition within the civil service to it was massive, because people were comfortable in their Dublin jobs and it was cheap to live in Dublin and the commuting wasn't as bad. Now, if we had decentralisation, and now obviously people are working from home now. Yeah. They're decentralised to every corner of the country and working from home and wanting to keep doing that. But, you know, that was a great initiative then. But I'd say it was just being overexposed and probably greed. There's no nicer way of saying it. Yeah. Companies and individuals were greedy. Yeah. They were doing very well and much wanted more, and there was scope for them to go and borrow more money, and unfortunately it all went wrong, and horribly wrong, and, you know, left an awful taste with people. There's no question about that. So I'd say it's a bit of cop on, and when companies are doing good, maybe say, look, I'll stick with what I have. Now, they are, at the moment, number one, it's very hard to get extra capital. Number two, it's very hard to get extra people. So, nightmare. You know, for companies that would have genuine plans and opportunities to expand now, it's very difficult for them to do that. But then, like, there was people pouring in from all over Europe and all over the world to work here. The banks will give you the money to go and expand. And unfortunately, you know, those things to say, people never see the top of the stock market coming, which is true. Yeah, very true. You know, and it goes up and down. To say they never see the top coming, or they never see the bottom coming. So when you're in a state of depression, you say, this is never going to end. And then all of a sudden it does end and it starts picking up again. So I don't know, those lessons, it takes about 20 years or so between. So the people that learn their lessons initially, probably there will be a new go of people that didn't know that. And they'll get caught again, you know.
Yeah, 100%. You were very vocal opponent to the formation of NAMA. I suppose looking back now, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I remember when it was being introduced, and like, it was, now this is an example, I suppose, of when the government decided to do something, with emergency legislation. But rightfully so in some cases, they said, we'll put manners on some of these developers that overextended and caused the problems.
Right.
And, there was an element of that being popular with people. There was an element of them going too far with the story, and businesses that were fairly viable were destroyed just because they wanted to hurt the individuals that were involved. But like, I was representing those people. I was, as the Director General of the Construction Industry Federation, there was a lot of developers who were members through the IHBA, and of course they were aghast at the notion of what was happening. And there was a level of them, they were in denial as to what was happening as well. They didn't think that it was going to be so bad. But we had a lot of very hairy meetings. We were in and out of government buildings, in and out of NAMA then when it got set up and so on. And I don't know whether it was the best thing to do. Something had to be done. But
it caused a lot of pain.
It surely did, absolutely. And there was probably, it's a bit like, if you do have a very bad ailment and, there's a number of different treatments, but this one, for a lot of people, there was no anaesthetic involved,
Yeah.
But then, the predicament was like Brian Cowan, whom I would know, and he's a fellow Offaly man, when he became Taoiseach, the predicament that he was presented with was just horrendous. Yeah. And the late Brian Lenihan in his time, I remember we did a pre-budget submission to Brian Lenihan as Minister for Finance in his office the morning before the IMF came in.
Oh, right.
He knew at that stage, and he was ill as well.
Oh, God.
And but he was a brave man to stand up and do what he did, through all of that. But unfortunately, the damage was done then. They inherited a really difficult situation, and NAMA was one solution.
Yeah.
I'm not expert enough to know was it the best solution.
Yeah.
It was a cure that brought a lot of bad consequences with it as well, and destroyed a lot of value in the country, and took a long time for the economy to recover. But there's a lot of people would say, well, look, it got at the guys that caused the problem, and tough luck on them. So look, the jury is out, but it was, but NAMA were all powerful.
Right. Okay.
And like, if we had a NAMA now to put infrastructure in place, or a NAMA to fix Irish water, or a NAMA to do housing, and put these guys in control, because they did what they liked then.
Yeah.
They hauled in guys, and
they had a lot of power.
They were all powerful.
Yeah.
And nobody could resist them.
Yeah.
So, that's what we need.
So in your opinion, in order to get the ball rolling and sort infrastructure, the likes of Irish Water, we need a body, something similar.
We do, absolutely, we do. And we need it now. And on the other hand, you could say, well, look, everything is fine. I drove out here to the studio this morning. The amount of industrial expansion happening in West Dublin is massive.
It's phenomenal.
And everything looks fine. But, our housing is still bad. There was a report there with the Metro that was going to take about 8,000 extra workers to build the Metro, and saying, where are they going to live? And, on the one hand, it's somebody trying to be negative about the whole prospect. Yeah. But on the other hand, it is a real scenario.
What do you think is going to happen, Tom, with this housing crisis?
Well, look, there's a lot of stuff. Things are improving, I think.
Yeah.
And even in the last couple of weeks, there's new housing initiative and new money's been made available and so on. But I know a friend of mine who is in the building game and wants to build a house for herself, a modest house, with her own company. It's going to cost over 400,000 to build a house. So it's the bloody cost of everything now. It's just
gone
materials, mad.
Yeah.
And of course there will be people saying that builders are ripping it off, but every element of work to do with construction, regardless of whether it be materials or labour or whatever,
it's gone through the roof.
It has gone mad, absolutely gone
and
mad.
And where is it going to stop?
Well, that's like, say, eventually a recession is the only thing that ever stops inflation,
Yeah.
So
can you see a recession coming?
Well, I'm not going to predict one here, Adia, that's for sure.
So I suppose, looking back in hindsight at everything, you were involved in the CIF and politics, and I suppose what's going on now, and what you've learnt, what would you put into place right now if I was to ask you that question?
Well, I was at an event I mentioned down with Condren Concrete.
Oh, you said that.
And I'm involved in Offaly GA, and they're very, very generous sponsors of Offaly GA. But he's a wonderful sponsor for different charities and so on. But he had myself and two sportsmen up for an interview, and he was doing the interviews himself, and he says, by the way, Tom, you spent a lot of years in the CAF. What's your solution to the housing crisis? I said, John, thanks be to Jesus, I don't have to answer that question anymore. And I do say I am relieved to be out, because it is a conundrum.
Yeah.
It isn't easy, and we can all point out what's wrong, but how do you get it right? And really, I think what I'm after saying, and I didn't put any thought into it, but when NAMA came in, they were all powerful. They were given powers to do what government felt they needed to do. Yeah. Some agency now needs to be given the powers to insist that the metro is built, to insist that we're doing 50,000 houses a year, and to insist that Irish Water is able to connect everyone that wants a connection. Like, that just has to happen.
Yeah, it has to happen.
In modern society, there will be all the naysayers immediately, and then public opinion will probably go with the naysayers, and there will be an election, and whoever sided with the tough measures will be turfed out.
Yeah.
But I think somebody is going to have to take that initiative, because otherwise we're heading into a difficult situation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So, Tom, you mentioned earlier you are, I suppose, an advocate for plant machinery. I suppose more agricultural side of things. I'd be more construction. I'm crushing and screening. But it's just remarkable how things have moved forward in the last, 20, 30 years. Have you seen a huge, huge change, Tom, in equipment?
Yeah. Well, I had a sobering experience. I was at a funeral of a very good neighbour of mine back just last week, and I met a lady at the house where the Mick Carey was the man that was dead, my next door neighbour. And this lady said, Tom, you served Mass at my wedding. And I said, my God, I had little thought. But then we're having a cup of tea in the house, and I said, how long ago was that? And she said, 61 years ago.
Oh, my God.
So, that's...
Why were you a priest?
Serving Mass. I was a Mass server. I was about maybe 8 or 9.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. You were dishing out the bread.
But I remember when you were asking me about machinery now, myself and a fellow Mass server, a chap called Frank Maher, his brother was after buying a new Massey Ferguson 185, which was one of the biggest tractors to come into the Midlands then. Right. It would be very, very tiny now. And after Mass one holiday, like a Thursday holiday, Ascension Thursday, whatever, the two of us cycled about 10 miles off beyond Roscrea, where we'd never ever ventured before, as two youngsters, didn't tell anybody at home we were going off for the day, just to see this tractor, because being a church holiday at the time, it was stopped. They weren't working on the church holiday. And I can remember the smell of that new tractor and standing around aping it for 2 hours. And then we got up on our bikes and came home. So that's how fascinated as a kid I was with. But then I started buying machinery and working them, and had a good agricultural business in terms of silage harvesting and grain harvesting and tillage and all of that. And just loved machinery and still would. But I saw lately, you were mentioned the Agrotechnica show, the FMTMA or whatever, the Farm Tractor Machinery Association here, did a survey about the value of Irish farm machinery, which is, I think, 6 or 7 billion to the country. And what's more, we have massive Irish manufacturers now that are manufacturing all sorts of stuff, and it's happening right across the board on the construction side as well. But we're exporting silage trailers to Australia and New Zealand. They're being built
Ireland is so ahead of the game when it comes to equipment.
So, we have terrific tradespeople, we have terrific workers, we have a terrific
engineering is different level here.
And so, but what I find, and it's happening on construction. I know a relative of mine was doing up a house lately, and they decided to take out the floor.
Okay.
And it was a well-constructed house with good concrete floor in it, but they're going to put in underfloor heating. But they had a little mini digger with a jackhammer, they had a little mini, and two guys went in there and they cleared it out in no time.
Yeah.
Whereas, Jesus, in my time, you'd be in there with a jackhammer and
yourself.
a shovel and a wheelbarrow,
Yeah.
and you'd be wrecked, and you were tough enough to do it. Whereas there's probably nobody would do that sort of work now.
No.
But that sort of machinery, and I see in technology now with new sprayers, with auto steer, with GMS, it is just incredible the technology that applies to agriculture machinery and construction machinery. So from that point of view, when we're concerned about labour, like the amount of guys with shovels on the Metro program, on the Metro project, will be very few.
That's true.
And, there was a time when it'd be all men with shovels were going to do all the work. So, like, it's all high-tech machinery. And clearly, the people that use that machinery have to be well-trained. But then young people are so quick now with mobile phones and so on that they learn that stuff very, very quick. So I think that's the way construction is going, is that, further investment in modern plant.
Modern technology,
and technology. And it is going to speed up the whole process a lot.
But I have to say, the innovations out there today it's incredible. Like, even in especially the north of Ireland, you have small little factories like just plotted all over it, and young people just coming up with new innovations every day of the week. Yeah. It really is incredible. So, Tom, sustainability and I suppose the green is huge now on construction sites. What's your opinion on all of that?
Yeah, well, I suppose I came from an era when I started, starting up my business, nothing was wasted.
Right.
And that's what circular economy is about. It's not nothing was wasted.
Yeah.
Like, I was always, and as a young fella, I never trained. I did a welding course in Marker-na-Farma.
Right.
And I could weld and plumb and roof, and I did that with the help of young fellas around me.
Okay.
And I mightn't have won any prizes for top quality, but most of them are still standing. But if you cut off a bit of iron, it went into a corner, and the next time you were looking for a bit, you might find a bit almost the length that you wanted it. Like, that was caused by not having the resources to waste stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas then we got into a period when there was, cut off the land, throw it in the skip, pay for it to be, so that's all changing now.
On-site recycling is becoming huge, which I think is fantastic.
And this whole, when sites have to be cleared and you're removing soil and you're removing stone and you're,
screening it,
grinding
soil stabilisation,
grinding, it's just pure sense that you'd reuse that.
Yeah.
But the rigmarole, I know when we had pyrite, when that caused a problem because nobody ever expected that filling under a house would cause a problem.
Yeah.
But then we learned there was pyrite. So then there was a concern that if you're, regrinding up concrete or whatever, maybe there's pyrite in it. But I think there's technology to get over that. So there's no reason that anything coming off a site
can't be
reused again. And then the other issue is about, I suppose, using fuels, diesels and so on, and
HVO.
Probably a lot of big heavy machinery not that suitable for going with battery still.
Yeah. It's getting more popular. There's a good few electric machines. There was one actually exhibited at ICE there last year. It was a Lu Gong. COD purchased it, and it was amazing. First electric excavator in Ireland, and it was amazing to see.
Well, unfortunately, I suppose, some people are buying them for almost for appearance. Say, oh, we're doing a very good job on sustainability. We have an electric truck.
Yeah.
But the ones doing all the work are the diesel ones because they will stay going.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a complication there, but
it would work on certain sites, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But you have to be set up. But then I suppose it goes back to what you're talking about. And is there electric chargers on site? To power this. So it's kind of a whole cycle.
Yeah, and there's no point in having all electric fleet of motors if we haven't got the electricity to
the power supply to power them. 100%.
And unfortunately, we have great potential for wind energy. We have good potential for solar, but whether it be judicial reviews or NIMBYism, and I know offshore wind off the west coast, is tricky apparently, and the depth of the ocean and the exposure means it's fairly expensive to get it on shore. But personally, I have no problem. I love to see wind turbines.
Oh, God, yeah.
If I'm driving by, I'd nearly stop if there's one close by just to see it. And yet there are other people. The mention of a wind turbine drives them into bloody lunacy. and they think they're going to destroy their whole world. So, and they get together, and there's a big campaign against the very notion of a wind farm happening and so on. And even solar, like you could have a solar farm right outside the hedge, and you wouldn't know it was there.
You wouldn't even know it's there, yeah. There's a new one down there.
And that's part of the planning now, is to get the hedges built and get them up and, shield them and, make them less obtrusive. And I suppose we're learning that, and we're learning maybe how to educate people that rather than be immediately taking an anti-view and this is going to destroy my life in the future, look at the positives. So, it's slow. And I heard somebody, saying that when the Greens were there, the big lot of the investment was going into public transport and cycleways and so on, and now there's a complete turnaround, and now we're going to go on expanding some new roads and so on. But like roads, I was talking to someone who was in Slane recently, and like I had forgotten about how bad Slane was. That old bridge is there for hundreds of years, and it's the only access. And they just said that day they were in Slane was just horrendous.
Oh God! And
yet there's such opposition locally to building a new bridge. They built one down in Killaloo lately, and I believe it's a fantastic help to the town, and have pedestrianised the old bridge now, which used to be a one-way bridge.
Okay.
So, like, infrastructure investment can mean so much, and all the times, like, if you're driving into Dublin from here now, you could be an hour and a half, but if you had a Lewis and had a metro, and the roads are clear for people driving, well, number one, you might choose not to bring the car, or number two, you do it in half or a quarter of the time. Like, when you're sitting there blowing exhaust fumes out the back and going nowhere, that has to be one of the most
drives you mad.
Worst features, yeah.
Yeah, I was in London there a couple of weeks ago, and the network, it's just phenomenal. I was in Newmarket, and I ended up in the city centre of London at the hotel in 40 minutes, 2 trains. Just phenomenal how it all works over there.
Yeah.
So, Tom, any advice that you would give to any, I suppose, young, emerging developers, contractors looking to get into the construction industry?
Well, the one thing that I was fascinated, and I didn't really know much about construction when I was invited to, I was an observer, but I hadn't paid that much attention. But like the people in construction, like they're terrific people.
Yeah.
Like, number one, you have to be a bit of a risk taker.
100%.
But now, like, it's the engineers, that are there, and particularly if you look at the electrical engineering and the people that are doing all the stuff for building the new pharma plants.
Yeah.
This
data centers.
This drug that's being created down in Kinsale for I've been looking out for a bit of it for myself for the weight loss.
Oh,
it was an Irish construction firm went into a greenfield situation there.
Right.
Put down a foundation, put all the plant in, got it commissioned and set it up, and now it's producing a drug that's in demand all over the world. Likewise with the cancer drugs and so on. Like, it's just, to think that the industry is able to create such a thing. And that's on the industrial side. And then likewise on houses, like when moving into a greenfield situation and creating a block of apartments that are well designed and that people can move into them and have a nice lifestyle into the future. Yeah. Like, that's great satisfaction to be 100%. Able to say and do things like that.
To even be a little part of it.
I know a friend of mine who is managing director of a fairly big construction firm now. He worked as an apprentice on a fairly big hotel down in Cork, and typical mothers would always be looking at their sons, and when they passed by this hotel in the early years, she'd say, "There's the hotel that Paul built."
Stop.
He was sweeping the floor more than doing anything else. But now he is actually building hotels,
Isn't that amazing?
And I'm sure if his mother was around, she'd be extremely proud of him. So, like, it's a tough game.
It is a tough game.
And I think the big challenge we have is to attract people into it.
Yeah, 100%.
And I know the CIF have been trying to attract women.
Yeah.
And when you go to other countries, you see a lot more women involved in construction, even in the manual aspects of it. Whereas, they've been discouraged here. And women have said to me lately, partly they're being discouraged because if you go onto a building site, there's no bloody decent women's loo.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've come across that problem right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's just a fairly basic element. Yeah. We talk the talk, but, we need to start walking the walk there on that. So attracting people into that. But like agriculture went through the same sort of problem back a few years ago. Like there was nobody wanting to go to ag colleges anymore, and it was just deemed to be old-fashioned or whatever. Now all of a sudden they're full of people wanting to go back into agriculture again. So it goes a bit cyclical, but certainly construction can be very rewarding. It pays well, and you're out in the fresh air, you're working with your hands a lot, and you can see the fruits of your work at the end of any one year. So, and it's always going to be, no matter what happens, even the new data centres that are being built, they will have to be refitted out with new technology, you know, over the next number of years. Houses need upgrading, you know, buildings. I'm involved in an ag college down in the west of Ireland, Mount Bellew, and it was built exactly 50 years ago. It needs an entire upgrade now.
Right, okay.
So, you know...
Retrofitting work like is even huge out
there. So, I do see a future, but it's challenging, and it's where the workers are going to come from. And we were a mecca one time, but now there's such development happening everywhere else that, you know, why would anyone want to come to Ireland? So we're going to probably have to use the best of technology, use the best of plant and machinery, and do the best we can.
Exactly. Well, look, Tom, thank you so much for coming in, and we hope to see you at Ice Expo this coming May. It's nearly a sellout already, so we'll definitely there'll be a lot of stuff there for you that you'll be very interested to have a look at. New innovations.
I'm looking forward to kicking a few tires down
No bother. Yeah, thanks a million, Tom.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you.
This podcast is kindly sponsored by Euro Auctions. The next auction takes place on the 12th and 13th of December in Dromore, County Tyrone.